It happened on an ordinary morning, or at least it seemed that way. The kind of morning I had lived through for nearly 70 years. Everything in its place, routine, familiar, and comforting. But that day, something was off. I woke up, as usual, early, before the sun even began to peek through the curtains. The first thing I did was reach for my wallet. It was always there, by my nightstand, right where my father had placed his wallet every morning before me. Except this time, it wasn't. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep, but the panic was already setting in. Maybe I had moved it, misplaced it somewhere, but no, I had always been meticulous about such things. I wasn't the kind of person who misplaces things, at least, that's what I had always told myself. I got up and started searching, under the bed, in every drawer, my jacket pockets, even in the bathroom, though I had no idea why. But nothing. The reality hit me slowly. $1,000 were gone, and there was no explanation. I sat back down on the bed, staring at the spot where the wallet used to be. The leather had worn over the years, the edges frayed, but it was mine. It had belonged to my father before it belonged to me. It had been a constant for as long as I could remember. And now it was gone. $1,000 had vanished. It wasn't like me to lose track of money. It wasn't like me to forget where I put things. I had lived a life of order, of precision, of knowing where every dollar went. But now, that certainty was slipping through my fingers, like water running through a cracked cup. I stood up and walked slowly down the stairs, my legs heavier than usual, as if they too had begun to age overnight. The house smelled of bacon, and I could hear Helen humming from the kitchen. It was that familiar sound, the sounds of a normal morning. But something was different. Something felt wrong. "Morning, Dad!" Helen called out cheerfully, turning to smile at me from the stove. "Morning, sweetheart," I muttered, though my mind was elsewhere. I didn't want to say anything, not yet. "Helen, have you seen my money? I had $1,000 in my wallet, and now it's gone." She turned, concern spreading across her face. "Money? I haven't taken anything from your room, Dad. Maybe you just spent it somewhere. You've been running around so much lately with everything that's been going on." Her words were like a slap to my chest. Did she think I was losing my mind? Was I one of those old men now who accused people of things because they couldn't remember? The self-doubt crept in, gnawing at me, but I fought it. I knew my money was gone. I wasn't losing my mind. Someone had taken it. Before I could say anything more, the door to the kitchen opened, and in walked Cleo, still in his work clothes from the day before. His dark eyes scanned the room, looking between Helen and me. It was that look I had come to recognize, defensive, guarded, like someone who knew they were about to be accused of something. "What's going on?" Cleo asked, his voice full of irritation. "Money problems again?" I looked at him, my voice steady but piercing. "Cleo, you haven't been in my room, have you? I can't find my wallet, and I'm missing $1,000. He stiffened instantly. His posture changed, becoming defensive, his arms crossing over his chest as if preparing for an argument. "What are you implying, Mr. Hargrove?" he snapped. "That I'm some kind of thief?" "I'm just asking," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I didn't say you took anything. I'm just asking if you've seen it." His face flushed, and the anger in his voice was immediate. "I work 16 hours a day to keep this family going. I don't need to steal from you, especially not my family." Helen stepped between us quickly, her hands fluttering in the air, trying to mediate. "Dad, Cleo wouldn't do something like that. There's got to be an explanation." But I watched Cleo closely. His words were sharp, too sharp, and his eyes wouldn't meet mine. There was something in his expression, a defensive anger, that didn't sit right with me. It was too quick, too practiced. I stared at him for a long moment, trying to read the look in his eyes. Finally, I nodded. "Of course," I said quietly. "I'm sure it will turn up." Cleo grabbed his lunch bag from the counter, then checked his reflection in the hallway mirror, as if making sure everything was in place. His gaze flicked nervously in my direction before he headed for the door. "I'm late for work," he muttered, and slammed the door behind him with more force than necessary. I watched him go, a knot tightening in my stomach. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't losing my mind. This wasn't just forgetfulness. Someone had taken my money. Helen was still standing in the kitchen, her expression softening. "Dad, you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you've just forgotten where you put it. You know, since Mom passed." I didn't want to argue with her. I could see the concern in her eyes, and I didn't want to burden her more than I already had. "Yeah," I said, though my voice wasn't as convincing as I had hoped. "Maybe you're right." But as I watched Cleo's truck disappear down Maple Street, I knew something wasn't right. I had been keeping track of every dollar in that wallet for years. 3 years of living alone had taught me to pay attention to even the smallest details. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being robbed. I had been watching Joshua for days, and the more I watched, the more my suspicions grew. His behavior was changing. I'd seen it before, small signs that were easy to ignore, but now they were impossible to dismiss. He was nervous around me, avoiding eye contact, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. His usual easygoing nature was gone, replaced with something harder to read, something unsettling. Every time I walked into the room, he suddenly found something to do. He'd shift in his chair, fiddle with the remote control, or make some excuse to leave the room altogether. It wasn't just paranoia. It was something in the air. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but something in my gut told me it wasn't right. And then, that evening, I saw it. Joshua came into the living room holding a small box, neatly wrapped in soft velvet. Kate looked up at him, surprised. She smiled brightly as she opened the box, her eyes lighting up at what she saw. A beautiful necklace. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, feeling my stomach drop. $1,000. That's what I had lost, and here it was, now hanging around Kate's neck. The money I had worked hard for, the money I had kept track of for years, was now being flaunted as a shiny, but ultimately useless, piece of jewelry. My voice caught in my throat, but I forced the words out. "Joshua, that's a very expensive gift. You didn't spend my money on that, did you?" He froze. His eyes met mine, and for a split second I saw it, guilt. It was subtle, but it was there. A flash of panic. His hand trembled slightly, but he quickly masked it with a smile. "No, Dad, it's just a gift. For Kate." But I wasn't fooled. I knew what I had seen. The way he avoided my gaze. The way his face flushed with the question. It was too much of a coincidence. I had spent years being meticulous about my money, my belongings. And now this? I felt betrayed, but I wasn't about to let it go. Not without finding out the truth. I leaned forward, my voice steady but firm. "How much did it cost, Joshua?" His expression flickered for a moment. It was the slightest change, but I saw it. His hands clenched at his sides, and he quickly looked away, avoiding my eyes. "Does it really matter?" he shot back, his voice defensive. "It's just a gift, all right?" The defensiveness in his voice was louder than any answer. It confirmed everything I had been suspecting. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being stolen from. And Joshua was the one doing it. I wasn't sure how to respond at first. My anger was building, but I knew I had to keep calm, to make him crack. "It matters to me, Joshua," I said, leaning in just a little more. "I think you took my money. And I think you spent it on this gift for Kate." Joshua's face went from flushed to pale, and he quickly turned away, as if to flee from the confrontation. "I'm late for work," he muttered, heading for the door. I watched him go, feeling a mixture of anger, disbelief, and a deep, painful betrayal. The weight of the moment settled on me. This wasn't just about a missing wallet. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, about family, about something deeper. And it was unraveling right in front of me. I sat there, my hands clenched in my lap. I didn't want to believe it. But I knew I had to face it. I had to act. It wasn't just about catching him. It was about justice, about making sure he paid for what he had done. He had taken something from me, and now I had to take it back. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I couldn't just keep sitting on my suspicions. I had to act. Every day I lived with this knot in my stomach, knowing that someone I'd trusted for years was stealing from me. But I also knew that without evidence, there was no way to prove it. And that's where my years of experience came in handy. I had spent most of my life as an engineer, working with gadgets, solving problems, designing systems. I knew how to set things up, how to watch without being seen. I'd been methodical about everything I'd ever done, and this situation was no different. If I was going to catch Joshua in the act, I had to be just as precise. That night, after Kate had gone to bed, I started setting things up. The camera was small, no bigger than a matchbox, and completely wireless. I'd found a discreet spot behind a picture frame in the living room, something that wouldn't attract attention, but would capture every movement. It had night vision, so even if Joshua tried to take something in the middle of the night, it wouldn't matter. I could catch him on film. I worked in silence, my hands moving with the precision I'd used on countless projects over the years. Every wire connected just so, every angle adjusted perfectly. As the camera came online and synced with my phone, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Everything was in place. I had done what I needed to do. Now, it was just a matter of waiting. I tested the camera once more, just to be sure. The live feed appeared on my phone, showing the living room clearly. I watched for a few minutes, making sure the picture was clear, the angle right. Then I locked the app and slipped the phone into my pocket. I wasn't going to sit there and wait, staring at the screen like some kind of spy. No, I was going to let it do its job. But as I turned off the light and settled into bed, I felt the weight of it all. I wasn't just catching a thief. I was tearing apart a part of my life. My family. I had always prided myself on being the man who could keep everything in order, who could fix things, who could make everything work. But now, here I was, putting a plan in motion that would break everything. I couldn't let it go, though. Not when the truth was staring me in the face. The next few days felt like a blur. I didn't mention the camera to anyone, especially not to Kate. I didn't want to involve her until I had proof. I knew it would hurt her, and maybe it would destroy everything, but I couldn't let that stop me. The idea that my own son-in-law had taken from me, had betrayed me in such a way, it was something I couldn't ignore. I watched the feed quietly, checking in when I could. The camera was recording Joshua's movements, but so far there had been nothing substantial. It was frustrating, waiting for something to happen, but I kept reminding myself, be patient. The truth would come out eventually. But it wasn't just the waiting that gnawed at me, it was the distance between me and Kate. Every time I looked at her, I saw her growing concern, her unspoken questions. She knew something was off, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her. How could I? How could I say that I had become suspicious of her husband, that I was watching him, setting a trap for him? She wouldn't understand. And I didn't want to lose her, too. Still, I couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. The isolation I felt was growing, creeping into every corner of my mind. The more I watched, the more detached I became from my family. I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to the way things were, even if I proved my suspicions true. This was a line I couldn't uncross. I stared at the phone screen for what felt like an eternity. The footage looped, playing the same scene over and over again. Joshua, my own son-in-law, standing in the living room, his movements swift but careful. I had known he was the one. All these days of suspicion, the gut feeling, the odd behavior, it all clicked into place now. There was no denying it. The video clearly showed him taking the money from the drawer, quick, smooth, and completely unaware of the camera hidden in the frame above. It was so simple, so deliberate, and so damning. My heart raced, but there was no time for excitement. No time for triumph. I had the proof, but now what? What would I do with this truth? I watched the scene again. His hand moved toward the drawer I kept locked. This was the one spot I had been watching for days. The money had been neatly tucked away, but there was Joshua, lifting the bills, hiding them in his jacket pocket. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, but even as the truth unfolded, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all settling in. What now? What did this moment mean for our family? Could I go to Kate with this? Could I confront him, knowing that everything I had believed in would be shattered? I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying my thoughts. There was no easy way to do this. This wasn't just about catching a thief. It wasn't just about the money. It was about everything: my relationship with Kate, with Joshua, with our entire family. I had set this trap, yes, but now I had to face the consequences of what it would bring. I thought about the years I had spent with them, watching Joshua grow into the man he had become, seeing him and Kate build a life together. How had it come to this? How had everything changed so quickly? The sense of betrayal I felt was suffocating. It wasn't just the money. It was everything he had stolen from me: trust, respect, the stability of our family. I took another deep breath. I couldn't back down now. The confrontation was inevitable. The truth had to come out. There was no turning back. I looked at the footage again, still digesting what I had seen. His face, flushed with guilt, as he looked around to make sure no one was watching. That face, once so familiar, so trustworthy, now seemed foreign to me. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind? But it didn't matter now. The truth was there, in plain view. Joshua couldn't talk his way out of this one. I had all the evidence I needed. My next step was clear. I set the phone down and stood up from the chair. The moment of action had arrived. It wasn't just about confronting him. It was about reclaiming the trust that had been so brutally shattered. But the weight of this moment wasn't lost on me. This would change everything. I could already feel the conflict growing inside me. The shame, the anger, the frustration, it all welled up together. I had spent so much time making sure everything was right in my life, in my home. But now I had to deal with the mess Joshua had made, the mess I had to clean up. I had known it would come to this, but now that it was happening, it was almost harder than I thought it would be. The weight of what was about to unfold was like a stone in my chest. But there was no more time for hesitation. No more room for doubt. It had to be done. The moment had come. The truth, which had been lurking in the shadows for so long, was finally about to be dragged into the light. I had watched the footage again, the video that confirmed everything I had feared. Joshua had taken the money, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. I stood in the living room, phone in hand, staring at the footage one last time before I confronted him. The video was undeniable. There he was, again, in the act of taking what didn't belong to him. It wasn't just the money that infuriated me, it was the sheer audacity. The betrayal was staggering. He had violated not just my trust, but my home, my family. The door opened, and Joshua walked in, his usual cocky confidence replaced by something else: nervousness, maybe even guilt, though he tried to mask it. He didn't know I had seen everything, but I could tell that he felt something shifting in the air. "Joshua," I said, my voice calm but filled with an undeniable weight. "We need to talk." He froze, his eyes narrowing slightly as he glanced from me to the phone in my hand. I could see the defensiveness in his posture, the way his hands instinctively curled into fists. He wasn't ready for this. But I was. I held up my phone, showing him the video. "This is you, isn't it? Taking my money." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Joshua's face twisted into an expression of disbelief, followed by an immediate defensive reaction. He took a step back, his words sharp and quick. "That's not me," he spat. "This is some kind of mistake. You've got it all wrong, old man." I stood my ground. "I don't think I do. You can deny it all you want, but the proof is right here." Joshua's eyes flicked to the phone, his mouth tightening. I watched him closely, looking for any sign of guilt, any crack in his defense, but there was nothing. He refused to acknowledge the truth. The lie came so naturally to him, it made me sick. But then, just as the tension in the room reached its peak, the door opened, and Kate stepped in. She was carrying a cup of tea, her face bright with that quiet smile she always had. But when her eyes met mine, when they fell on the phone in my hand, that smile faltered. She stopped dead in her tracks, sensing the heavy air, the shift in the room. Her gaze moved between Joshua and me, and in that instant she knew. "Caitlin," I said softly, my voice tight with the weight of the moment. "I have something to show you." Without a word, she set the tea down on the table, walking toward me. She peered at the screen, and I watched her face go pale as the video played. Her eyes darted back and forth, processing what she was seeing, and I could almost feel her world shatter in that instant. Joshua's defensive posture faltered as he looked at her, but then his anger flared up. "Kate, this is all nonsense. Don't listen to him. He's just trying to turn you against me." Kate took a step back, her hand reaching out to steady herself against the wall. She looked at me, then back at him, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Tell me this isn't true. Please." Joshua opened his mouth to protest, but there was no sound. The denial stuck in his throat. Kate's face crumpled, and the tears began to fall. Her whole body seemed to deflate, as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. The shock, the disbelief, it was too much for her to bear. I watched as she collapsed onto the couch, her hands trembling. The woman I had known, the woman I had raised, was shattered. I couldn't protect her from this. No matter how much I wanted to shield her, the truth was out. And it hurt her more than anything I could have imagined. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How could you do this to us, Joshua?" Joshua stood there, silent now, his face hard, his jaw clenched. He didn't have an answer. He had no excuse. There was nothing he could say that would make this right. His actions had already done too much damage. I stood there, feeling the weight of the silence that settled over the room. The air was thick with tension, with hurt, with betrayal. I had known this moment was coming, but seeing it unfold, seeing Kate break down like this, it was harder than I had anticipated. I had sought the truth, but now that it was here, it felt like everything was falling apart. Kate's sobs filled the space between us, and I couldn't move. I couldn't fix this. All I could do was stand there, as my family crumbled before me. Joshua didn't say another word. The room was filled with the raw sound of Kate's grief, and in that moment, I realized how much this would change everything. Nothing would ever be the same again. The door slammed behind Joshua as he left. The sound of it echoed through the house, like the final nail being hammered into a coffin. I stood there, watching the empty space he had just occupied, the silence in the room almost deafening. It was over. He was gone. But the aftermath of the confrontation was still hanging heavily in the air. The truth had come out, but at what cost? I had done what I thought was right, but now, with the dust settling, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. Kate had retreated to the couch, her hands clutching a blanket tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was something else, something deeper in her gaze. She was struggling to understand, to reconcile what had happened with the reality she was now faced with. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I never thought he would do something like this." I didn't know what to say. I had already said everything I needed to say to Joshua. But Kate, she was the one I was worried about now. She had been caught in the middle of all this, and I knew it wasn't easy for her. "It's not your fault, sweetheart," I said softly, sitting down beside her. "You couldn't have known." But as I spoke those words, a part of me knew they weren't entirely true. She had trusted him. She had chosen him. And now she was facing the consequences of that trust being broken. The weight of it was written all over her face. She had lost something far more valuable than just a man she had loved. She had lost her sense of security, her faith in the people closest to her. "I don't know what to do," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know who he is anymore. How could he?" Her words trailed off, and I could see the confusion and hurt in her eyes. She was searching for answers, but none of the answers made sense. And there was nothing I could say to ease her pain, nothing I could do to undo what had happened. I looked at the door where Joshua had just walked out, his anger still hanging in the air like a dark cloud. He had left without a word of apology, without a moment of reflection. His departure had been filled with fury, the door slammed so hard that the frame trembled. He had stormed out like a child, angry that the consequences of his actions had caught up with him. But in his anger, in his refusal to face what he had done, I saw something else: cowardice. He couldn't even admit his mistakes. He couldn't even look Kate in the eye and apologize. And that, to me, spoke volumes about who he really was. I turned back to Kate. She was still staring ahead, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't fully express. I could see the emotional battle she was fighting, the war between love and betrayal, between loyalty to her husband and the painful truth about what he had done. "I don't know how to fix this, Dad," she said, her voice breaking again. "I don't know how to move forward." I didn't know either. I had tried to protect her from this. I had tried to shield her from the pain of seeing the truth, of knowing what had really been going on in our home. But the truth had a way of finding its way out, no matter how much we tried to hide it. I sighed, my heart heavy with the realization that the family I had once known was now gone. The pieces were scattered, and no amount of effort could put them back together. We could try to heal, try to rebuild, but the cracks would remain. They always did. "Sometimes the truth hurts, sweetheart," I said, my voice filled with sadness. "But we have to face it, no matter how much it tears us apart." She nodded slowly, her tears falling quietly. The truth had been exposed, but the cost of it was far more than I had anticipated. We had lost something precious: trust, love, security. And now, we were left to pick up the pieces. I looked out the window, lost in my thoughts. The world outside seemed unchanged, but inside, everything had shifted. The truth had a way of doing that. It didn't just reveal what was hidden, it destroyed everything in its path. And no matter how much I wished things could go back to the way they were, I knew they never would. The house felt quieter now. Not just because there was less noise, no more angry outbursts, no more arguments that had once filled the rooms, but because there was something else. The space Joshua had occupied, the tension he had brought, was gone. He was no longer here, and with his departure, something else had left too. A certain energy, a certain harmony that had once existed in this home, had been broken. And while it was no longer filled with chaos, it wasn't whole either. I had spent the past few days reflecting on everything, on what had happened, on the choices I had made, and on the truth that had been laid bare. It hadn't been easy, but the situation had reached its inevitable conclusion. Justice, for all its pain, had been served. Caitlin had left that morning, her bags packed, her decision made. She hadn't said much before she left, and I hadn't stopped her. She needed to find her own path, but I couldn't help but wonder where she was going. I suspected she had gone to Joshua, maybe for some comfort, some semblance of familiarity amidst all this chaos. I didn't know how to feel about it. On one hand, I understood her need to seek solace, but on the other, it hurt to think of her choosing him over the truth that had torn us apart. As the hours passed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. What was she feeling? What was she hoping for? But the truth was, I didn't have the answers. I wasn't sure if she did either. I watched the door for a moment after she left, hearing the soft click of it closing behind her. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to run after her, to tell her everything would be okay. But I knew that wasn't true. I couldn't promise that. Not now. Instead, I sat down in my favorite chair, the one by the window that had become so familiar to me over the years. I looked out at the world beyond, but there was no real sense of escape. The streets outside seemed to move with life, cars passing, people walking by, but I felt separated from it all. I had done what I needed to do, and yet, I felt a strange sense of emptiness. The silence in the house now felt like a weight on my chest. I had hoped for peace, for clarity, but instead, I found myself caught in a space that was both empty and full at the same time. The absence of Joshua was a relief, but it was also a void, a place where the warmth of family had once been. I thought about the years I had spent here, raising my daughter, sharing this home with people I had loved. And now, it was all different. It was just me, the same house, the same walls, but the family I had once known was no longer whole. I tried to focus on the positive, the fact that justice had been done, that I had stood up for what was right. But there was still a lingering ache, a sadness that settled deep in my chest. The truth had come out, and though it had been painful, it had been necessary. But even as I accepted that, I couldn't help but mourn the family I had lost in the process. The sun was setting outside, casting a soft, golden glow over the room. The warmth of the light felt comforting, like a small balm to the wounds that had been opened in my heart. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the quiet wash over me. It wasn't the end of the world. It was just the end of something I had known. The end of a family, yes, but not the end of me. I would rebuild, in my own way, in my own time. But for now, there was peace. It wasn't the peace I had imagined, but it was peace nonetheless.